welcome back to my channel. I'm Nichelle, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books I read this past spring. We're like actually not all the way through spring, it's still April. I think we don't even switch to summer like officially until like late June. But honestly, at this point I had like 10 books that were a favorite from the last time I did a wrap up, so I wanted to come and share them. So this is like spring, early spring favorites. These are 10 books I read over the last few months that I absolutely adored. The first one was The Pisces by Melissa Broder. So I've actually heard about this book for a while, and the big thing you'll hear about it is it's weird. And I don't think you can emphasize that enough. It is like a weird, kind of gross book. It's very weird. So essentially the premise is this woman, I think she's in her like early 30s. She's a grad student. She's working on her PhD dissertation on Sappho's poetry. But she's just gone through kind of a nasty breakup, and so her sister, who was, I think it's like her stepsister, they went around each other a ton as children, is like, you can move into my house. She lives in Venice Beach. She has this gorgeous like beachfront house. While me and my husband go, I don't know, they go abroad somewhere. If you'll come and like take care of our dog. They have like an old decrepit dog. And the main girl is like, yes, for sure. And so she's there, and she's trying to like get over this ex, and she's going to like group therapy, and the therapist is like, don't go dating other people, and she's like, F you. And she goes and hooks up with a bunch of people, and then one night she's out at the beach in the middle of the night, and she meets this like merman. And initially you don't know he's a merman, except you do because you've got into this book knowing what's happening, and they like develop a relationship, an entanglement, if you would. And it's very strange, it's very weird. It kind of gets into bodily functions of mermaids in a way that feels slightly invasive, but fun. And I thought it was really interesting, this exploration of, I love a good ennui story, and this is definitely got those things going for you. So enjoyed that. If you're looking for something like totally bananas out there, this is a story for you. The next thing that I absolutely love that I read this spring was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. So this is the first book in her Crescent City series. I wanted to read this before Crescent City 2 came out. I haven't read the second one yet. I have like planning on it, but it's kind of a commitment. This book took me like, I think like a week and a half to get through, which is like a long time for me to spend on a single book. It's like very chunky, and it is like pretty complex. It's Sarah J. Maas's first adult book, and I think you can really tell it's adult kind of in the way she handles themes and the complexities in the world. I'm not someone who's familiar with like urban fantasy, which is what this is. So it's fantasy that has kind of a lot of the modern technology that we have. Like, it's our world plus magic, and maybe even like a slightly future world. I don't know. It's confusing. It is like a complex political system. It took a while to kind of like figure out what was going on. Once I did, I really liked it. I really love our main characters. I love Bryson Hunt. Also, I did not know what this was going into it. I feel like I was lied to. Rewind. I thought this was a fun and fresh story about Danica and Bryce being best friends and solving a murder together. Chapter 5, this is maybe a minor spoiler, it happens in chapter 5, so like we're not very far into the novel. Danica dies. It's about Bryce trying to solve Danica's murder. And I definitely thought it was going to be a fun and fresh time about two girls living in the city trying to solve a murder together. And it was not. So do be aware of that. It deals pretty heavily with Bryce trying to like grapple with her grief over losing her best friend and feeling like partially responsible for her best friend's death. But also like there's lots of magic and fun stuff. Sarah J. Maas is, I think, a brilliant storyteller. I'm really excited to see where the series goes. Like I said, I haven't read the second book yet, but I plan to. It will probably be in my next reading wrap up. The next thing I read and loved, we are like really just giving you whiplash. I talk about how I like to really read a little bit of everything, and this list gives you a true example of that. Because my next book is a memoir by Chanel Miller. I read Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Her name might sound familiar. She was actually the victim in the Stanford rape case, the Jane Doe. Her victim impact statement went viral on BuzzFeed, and I read this for another video, so I won't talk extensively about it, but I adored it. 5 stars. I thought the writing was really beautiful. She did a beautiful job talking about her story in a way that didn't feel traumatic for me as a reader, if that makes sense. Not that she's like obliged to do that. I think, you know, people can tell their stories however they would like, but I felt like she did it in a way where it really truly felt like you were talking to a friend, and she talked about how hard it was, but in a way that was like fairly accessible and not something that was like super overwhelming. So I like loved that. Felt like her memoir was done like very beautifully and very approachably. Next on my list, and again was from another video, from that same video actually, Memorial by Brian Washington. This is UnCarly's favorite. That's kind of where it came to be, and she talks about it in all of her videos. I don't think I confessed this in the last video, but I have thought that cover for the longest time was underwear and a flagpole. It's not. The cover is definitely a picture of a grocery bag on chopsticks, and that makes sense. The premise of the novel is you have these two men who have been in a relationship for several years at this point. Things are kind of fizzling a bit, and one of the men is a Japanese immigrant, and both his parents still live in Japan. And so he winds up, his mother comes to stay with them in America. At the same time, he leaves to go stay with his terminally ill father in Japan. So we see it from both perspectives, but my favorite is we see it from, the names are Mike and Benson, and I can never remember which one is which. But we see it from the guy who is staying in the States with essentially his Japanese mother-in-law, and those dynamics, which are brilliant. And then we also see this man going to stay with his like estranged terminally ill father in Japan, and I just loved it. I thought it was really beautiful and stunningly, it's gorgeously written. Brian Washington did a gorgeous job writing it, and just like a really compelling story about these two men, but also about the relationships they have with everyone else in their lives. I really loved it. Next, kind of in a similar vein, we were a literary fiction girly this month, I guess, or this season, these past few months. Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. I picked this up, I think, based on Kat from Paperback Dreams' recommendation, or maybe her sister, or maybe not them at all. That's my memory of where I heard of it. But essentially it's about this girl who is having like a really rough mental health time. She's like got really bad anxiety attacks, has like pretty bad like hypochondriac, is also like pretty depressed, has gone through a breakup fairly recently, and finds this ad for free counseling at this Catholic church. And she goes in, and for some reason the priest thinks that she's not there for free counseling but is there for the secretary job, and so she winds up becoming the secretary at this Catholic church and having to pretend to be Catholic, as she is like a lesbian who is atheist, but she like decides to pretend to be Catholic and maintain this secretary job because she really does need a job. And it's just about her kind of interacting with all these people at the church, and also kind of trying to like put her life back together. It is a very like wandering of a story, but I really, really enjoyed it. I thought the main character was like really like endearing. She had a really endearing voice, relatable and funny and charming, and everything you could ever want from a novel like that. Next up, we have a mystery, and this is from a video again. I really had a lot of success in the books that I read in Booktuber's favorite book video. I think three of these are from that video, so there's some good recs in there. And it's The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave, and this was one of Chandler Ainsley's favorite books that she read in 2021, and I loved this. I had heard kind of like really mixed things about this when it first came out. It is definitely more of a mystery than a thriller, and I think people went into it expecting kind of like a thrilling ride, and I thought it was very engaging, but it definitely is not like a breakneck speed of a thriller. They're not really like kind of in danger. There a little bit, but like not at the same level you would expect from a thriller. But I thought it had a really good mystery, and I thought kind of the underlying familial and relationship dynamics were gorgeous. It is about this woman who lives on a houseboat in Sausalito, which like what a dream, and her husband sends a note home and is like, take care of my daughter. And his daughter is from a previous marriage. His previous wife has died. The main woman and the daughter are like, have like a kind of tense relationship. She's only been married to the husband for like a year. They've only known each other for a couple years. Like things are kind of tense. But it's about this woman kind of developing this relationship with her stepdaughter, and also about how well she did not know her husband. And I thought it was gorgeous. I loved it. I loved kind of the reveal of the mystery, but more than that I kind of loved the journey, and it's like a very like tender and like loving story in a lot of ways, and I really enjoyed that. Next, we have a little cartoon rom-com. I love these type of books. They're my bread and butter, and I read The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I think this is a couple years old at this point, and it's a favorite of a lot of people, and I really enjoyed it. It is about these two people who work at public radio, one who's been a producer there for years, and then one who's kind of like this hotshot new guy who just came in as an intern. And they kind of have like a rivalry at the beginning, and then they're set up to host this radio show, and they're going to pretend to be exes. So they're hosting this relationship dating radio show, but they're pretending to be exes. And so it's like a little bit enemies to lovers, and it's really fun, really delightful. Like lightly beach read vibes, like vaguely. Beach read adjacent vibes, you know? Very good though. Okay, if you've been keeping up on my channel, you know what my next one is going to be. That is Manacled by Senlan Yu, and I am including it even though it's not really a book. It is Harry Potter fanfiction, but I think it's brilliant. I like really had an enjoyable time reading it. It is such an engaging story, and to call it a book is a little bit rude to everyone. This thing is a mammoth. It's like the same length as 2 of the 7th Harry Potter books, or the first 3 books in the Twilight Saga, so like a mammoth. I would consider it more of like a trilogy almost. I did read it over the course of like a week, most of that being in a 24-hour period. Anyway, if you want to hear, I go into depth about my thoughts about this piece of Harry Potter fanfiction that I wound up loving in that video where I talk about fanfiction and Court of Silver Flames. But essentially it's like Handmaid's Tale meets Harry Potter. This diverges from the traditional Harry Potter canon at the 6th book. Essentially Draco Malfoy kills Dumbledore earlier, which means that Dumbledore is never able to share the details about the Horcruxes, which leads to Order of the Phoenix losing the Battle of Hogwarts, and then the war doesn't go super well for Harry Potter and gang. And so it's kind of about the events that happen after that, and it follows Hermione and this relationship she forms with Draco as she's kind of put under Draco's care in a handmaid sort of slave situation. It's very dark. It is incredibly dark. I cannot emphasize enough how dark it is. Like, I would put it up there with A Little Life in like content. Like, A Little Life still wins by like probably a couple miles, but like Little Life was like a full like marathon road trip ahead of everyone else. So do be prepared going into that. This is heavy, this is dark. I sobbed through it. I thought about it. I like sat and stared at the wall for like an hour after I finished it. It is a lot to process. Don't think just because it's like Harry Potter fanfiction that it's gonna be a light fluffy time, because it is truly not. These next two I actually finished like quite recently, like in the past few days, but they were both really great. And I had to share them with you. The first one is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. This book has been on my TBR for like months at this point. My sister actually got it for me for Christmas. But 1, because this cover is like literally stunning, and 2, there's like a lot of reasons. 2, my sister, not the one who gifted it to me, my other sister, his name is Crystal, and she spelled her name with a K, which is like rare, and so whenever I see that, I think of her. And also it's about 3 sisters, and as you may have noticed, I am the eldest of 3 sisters. And this book is a YA horror, and I think this book does pretty creepy, which by that, not like this is kind of creepy. It's like pretty creepy. I mean like pretty and creepy. It's like a lot of like rotting flowers, nature, forest, kind of like yucky, but like beautiful imagery. And I loved it. I think it has some fun like twists and turns. It was a delight. I enjoyed it. I guess I should tell you the premise. It is the story of these 3 sisters, and before the book starts, we know, or well, not before, we learn very quickly at the beginning of the book that these 3 sisters had like a very strange thing happen to them when they were young children. When they were young children, they vanished on New Year's Day, and then 1 month later were found like naked in the exact same spot. And when they came back, their hair turned white, their eyes turned black, and they like had like weird things started happening to them. And so like we know something strange happened to them in that time they were gone, but the youngest sister who we're following, Iris, she didn't have any memory of what happened to them, and so we don't know what happened to them as readers. So we just know like something weird happened to them. And then the eldest sister goes missing, and there's like a creepy guy that's following them around, and so Iris and Vivi, the younger 2 sisters, kind of go on a mission to try to find Grey, their eldest sister, and rescue her, obviously. I loved it. I loved it. I love anything that has 3 sisters in it. I'm talking like the good parts of A Court of Thorns and Roses. And yeah, delight. And then my last read is another one that's a little bit heavier, but honestly wasn't as heavy as I expected. Let me explain. So it's My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is the story of a woman and also a teen girl who, it's the same. It's told in two timelines. So we get the perspective of her as a 15-year-old moving forward, so we go through several years of her life, and then also as like a 32-year-old reflecting back on these 15-year-old experiences. So it's the story of this young woman who was groomed and sexually assaulted by one of her teachers in the boarding school she goes to as a 15-year-old. And so we get the perspective of her as a 15-year-old as it's kind of happening to her, and then she's also reflecting back on it as a 30-year-old as this teacher allegations are coming out against him. And it is fascinating. I think it was gorgeous. I knew this book was going to be heavy. I'd heard a lot about like how heavy it is, and it definitely deals with a heavy topic, but I felt like Kate Elizabeth Russell did such a gorgeous job dealing with it. She dealt with it in a way where you could understand where the 15-year-old was coming from. You like, not that it made sense, not that you were like, this sounds like a good idea, but that you were like, oh, I understand why she's doing this, without romanticizing the relationship. I think a lot of times student-teacher relationships get romanticized. I'm looking at Arya and Ezra Fitz from Pretty Little Liars, and she doesn't do that in the slightest. It's like not romanticized. It's not done in a way that is all that feels very like exploitative of the situation, even though it's fictional. I felt like she did such a stunning job. And then as a 30-year-old, she's reflecting back on it, and she still doesn't really see herself as a victim in this situation, and she's trying to kind of come to terms with the fact that she at once like recognizes there are things that she didn't like about the situation, but also doesn't see herself as a victim of the situation, kind of sees herself as an active participant. It was gorgeous and dealt with this issue in like a really nuanced and interesting way. I finished it in like 24 hours. It was like very engaging, and like I said, I didn't feel, I mean, everyone is different obviously, but I felt like the heavy topic was dealt with in a way that was didn't take away from like the gravity of the situation without kind of like feeling like you were getting beaten like you do in A Little Life. I love to reference A Little Life because that would be the opposite. There was like a lot of nuance dealt with in that situation, but it did feel like you were just being beaten with a sledgehammer. I didn't feel like I was being beaten while I read this book, which we love. We love that. So I loved that. That was the last thing I finished, actually. So yeah, those were my 10 favorite books I've read over the past couple months. If you want to know everything that I've read over the past few months, you can go to my blog. I list everything there. Subscribe if you're interested in more videos. I'm sure I will read more books. Anyway, have a great day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.